Hey, it's Tom here and welcome back to the channel. Now, the last video here on the Investing with Tom channel was a 13F update. Basically, that gave us all of the recent quarterly filings on what some of my favorite investors have bought and sold. But there are a few investors that don't file a traditional 13F filing. Maybe they don't manage enough money to get over and above that $100 million threshold, or maybe they have some sort of unusual structure that means that they file their investment portfolios in a slightly different way. And one of the investors I like to follow who falls into that second category, where they do have to file their portfolio updates, but it's not in a traditional kind of 13F form, is Phil Town from the Rule 1 Fund and the Rule 1 Investing YouTube channel and books and so on. Phil Town is someone that introduced me to many of the basic concepts of value investing when I was first getting started. So it's really interesting that over the past year or two, we've been able to kind of see what Phil Town has been doing in real time. And we've just recently got the latest filing out of his Rule 1 Fund, which will give us his investment activity up until the 31st of December 2021. So in this video, I want to dive right into Phil Town's recent portfolio activity. Luckily, since this isn't a 13F, we actually get some extra information that gives us kind of a more complete picture of the portfolio as well. So it's going to be interesting to dive into that. But before we get into that, we do have a sponsor for today's video, and this video is sponsored by Hatch. Hatch is the platform that I personally use for all of my US investing as a Kiwi based here in New Zealand. And in 2022, Hatch is asking you to think about what your big and small tomorrow goals look like. For me, the goal has always been financial freedom, putting a little bit away today with the aim being that I can do the things that I want to do tomorrow. Everyone's tomorrow looks different, whether you want to buy your first home, travel the world, or become financially independent. Reaching your tomorrow goals starts by taking the first step. That's why I invest with Hatch, to help me make my plans a reality. If you want to get started investing with Hatch, check out the first link in the description where you can get a free 20 New Zealand dollar top up when you make your first deposit of 100 New Zealand dollars or more before the 30th of June 2022. Okay, so let's get straight into the portfolio here for Phil Town. I'm basically going to work through each of the individual holdings that Phil Town has, compare his current shareholding to what he had in the previous quarter. So that will be comparing the 31st of December 2021 share count, which is what we got in the most recent filing, against what the share count looked like 3 months earlier at the end of September 2021. That will allow us to see any buys and sells that Phil Town may have made. And then in the second half of the video, I want to get into Phil Town's options portfolio. So one of the advantages of the fact that Phil Town actually doesn't file a 13F is we can see what his current cash position looks like, which in the case of the Rule 1 Fund is pretty hefty, and we'll get into that. So we can see the cash allocations, and we can also see the specific options contracts that he's either written or that he has purchased in the fund. So that kind of gives us a feel for what Phil Town is potentially maybe thinking about buying or selling out of in his kind of core portfolio. And I should say a big shout out to stock compounder Brad Kellner for setting up a spreadsheet template, which I've used for this video. So if you're not already subscribed to Brad, definitely go and check out his channel. He does some great content on all things value investing over there. So in terms of Phil Town's largest position, that is actually not a company, that is his cash holding in his portfolio. Now, his cash holding is sort of made up of two different components. He currently has about $56.4 million in GOIXX, which is basically like a money market fund, short-term kind of cash equivalent that he could, in theory, basically take that cash out of the money market fund and invest it very quickly if he wanted to. So that makes up actually the bulk of the cash holding. That's about $56 million. And we also have an additional 20.8 million in cash. So if we add up the money market fund and just the straight cash holding, that is about $77.2 million. Now, the Rule 1 Fund has assets of about $156 or $157 million. So that is getting very close to about a 50% cash position in the portfolio. And if you've followed Phil Town for a long period of time, that's probably no surprise. Phil Town has kind of thought that the stock market is expensive and there's not a lot of companies kind of on sale for quite a long time now. So we've seen that same kind of thing in various filings from the Rule 1 Fund previously, and kind of no change for this particular quarter. Still a big chunk of the fund in cash. Now, if we start working through some of the actual holdings aside from cash that Philtown has, Philtown's largest position is currently, and it was last quarter as well, it remains Bank OZK. So that is currently about a $19.3 million position, or about 12.4% of the fund, cash included, and we had no change in shareholding for Bank OZK. And directly after that, probably the biggest move that we saw from Philtown for this quarter was a 190% increase in his shareholding of Alibaba. So Philtown continues to buy Alibaba. He had 50,000 shares or 50,000 ADRs in the fund as of September, and that was actually the first time that he'd purchased Alibaba. We've seen that shoot all the way up to 145,000 shares now. So that is a 190% increase in his Alibaba holding. Now represents about a $17.2 million position, or about 11% of the fund. So aside from cash and Bank OZK, that is the next biggest position in the fund for Philtown. We then have several positions where Philtown has made absolutely no change in the portfolio. So Sprouts Farmers Market represents 5.9% of the portfolio. Huntington Ingalls, which is basically like a military ship builder, no change there, represents about 5.3% of the portfolio. Armada Hoffler, which is a REIT, represents 4.2%. The Spider Gold ETF, which in my view is kind of another cash alternative. So I think Philtown's sort of cash position, or money that he would invest in shares of companies if prices were right, is probably actually higher than the 49 or 50% literally in cash and money market funds. That's how I think he's probably viewing that gold holding. But that is about 3.3% of the portfolio. Next we have Sturm Ruger & Co. Again, no change there, 2.7% of the portfolio. Boeing, 2.6%. Barrick Gold, which is a gold miner, 1.8% of the portfolio. And then we get into a couple of positions that he has sold down. The first position, which he has trimmed slightly, is his iShares Silver Trust investment. Again, I think similar to gold, probably somewhat of a cash alternative, perhaps a bit of an inflation hedge as well. I'm not quite sure, to be perfectly honest. But that one's been trimmed about 13%. So he's gone from 115,000 shares in that iShares Silver Trust down to 100,000 shares, about a 13% reduction, and it now represents 1.4% of the portfolio. And finally, in terms of activity in the core portfolio, we had one stock that was completely sold out of, which was CF Industries. Now, this is a company that Philtown has quite a lot of history with. He's been in and out of CF Industries quite a bit over time. If you're not familiar already, they are basically the low-cost producer of nitrogen fertilizer in the US. We've seen nitrogen fertilizer prices rocket, particularly here in New Zealand. I assume that the situation's pretty similar in a lot of countries, the US included. They have access to low-cost natural gas, which is required to produce nitrogen fertilizer, which is kind of the moat that Philtown sees at CF Industries. So interesting to see him sell that down completely. That has been a fairly sizable position for him in the past. So I suspect it's probably a price thing more than anything. I'll put a CF Industries chart up on the screen here. It has performed reasonably well over the last year or so. So that is the last stock on the list here in the Philtown portfolio, a complete sale of CF Industries. Okay, and now let's move into the options part of the portfolio for Philtown. This is often one of the more interesting parts of the Rule 1 Fund updates, because we get a real feel for which companies Philtown is potentially looking at making changes with. So if he sells puts on a company, for example, that basically tells us that he wants to collect some premium, acting kind of like an insurance company when he sells these put options. And he's generally only doing that on companies that he would like to own at that price anyway. So it gives us a real feel for which companies are on that kind of potential buy list for Philtown, and it gives us kind of some ballpark prices as well. And on the other side of the equation, he does also write call option contracts, so that potentially gives us a feel for stocks he might be looking to sell out of in the near future as well. So let's start with some of the put option contracts that are written, because this is quite interesting, and we actually have a brand new stock included this quarter. And that new company that we see Philtown has written some put option contracts for is actually Activision Blizzard, which is a stock that I have never seen in a Philtown filing. It's never been a core holding, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that we've seen option contracts kind of written on that company as well. So many of these options contracts are very short term, so many of them have actually expired by the time this filing comes out, and that was actually the case with Activision Blizzard. So he had put option contracts at a $57 strike price, expiring on the 31st of December 2021. But nonetheless, really interesting to see that new position in the put options kind of portfolio. Will be interesting to see if that continues to show up in the next handful of quarters. So Activision Blizzard was a new one. If we continue down the list of companies at which the Rule 1 Fund has written some of these put option contracts, we see Alibaba, again, expiring on the 31st of December 2021 with a $100 strike price. We see Sprouts Farmers Market with a $27.50 strike price, expiring on the 21st of December 2022, so that one has also already expired. And finally, we see Boeing with a $170 stock price, expiring on the 7th of January 2022. Now, interestingly, there was actually one company where the Rule 1 Fund purchased put options. I'm not familiar enough with Philtown's option strategy to really explain why that might have happened. But if anyone does know what's going on there, definitely let me know down in the comments section below. So that company was, again, Boeing. He actually purchased put options at $165 strike price, with a expiry date of the 7th of January 2022. So that's really interesting. He has put options that he sold on Boeing for that same date, $170 strike, and he's bought put options, $165 strike, with the same expiry date. So if anyone has a feel for what's going on there, definitely let me know down in the comments section below. Now on the call option side, so this is potentially giving us a feel for some companies that he may be looking to sell out of, and in the cases where he has written call option contracts, we see two particular stocks on there. So we have Boeing again, this time at a $205 strike price, expiring in December 2021. And we see the silver ETF that was in Philtown's core portfolio, $22 strike price, and expiring on the 7th of January 2022. And again, just like the put option contracts, we do actually see one company where a call option was purchased, and interestingly, that was with Alibaba. So clearly Philtown is quite bullish on Alibaba. He has bought a call option contract with an $85 strike price, and this is actually the longest dated option contract currently in his portfolio. So that one does not expire until the 16th of June 2023. Okay, and that is where the Rule 1 Fund portfolio currently sits in terms of the stock holdings, the cash position, and also the options portfolio. This particular portfolio is quite a cool example where we get to see kind of all of those aspects that you don't necessarily see in a lot of 13F filings. There are companies out there like Berkshire Hathaway, for example, where we can see the quarterly reporting and the annual reporting from the core company, so we get a bit of a feel of the broader picture and how the stock portfolio kind of fits in, but that's kind of rare, so it is really kind of fun to dive into a bit more of the details here with Philtown's Rule 1 Fund. So I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know some of your biggest takeaways down in the comments below. If you're interested in the Hatch offer, that will be the first link in the description as well. But that's it from me for this one, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.